Even though they flew thousands of missions during World War II, blimps did not sink a single enemy submarine. But how many blimps did the submarines destroy? That question leads to 3 of the strangest World War II naval battles you've probably never heard of. But we're gonna show you them today, and they're legit crazy. My grandpa was a blimp pilot in World War II, so I grew up listening to stories of these giant balloons that were tasked with guarding cargo ships from enemy subs. And me, I served as a submarine officer on a Los Angeles-class fast attack submarine. To help me answer this question, who would win a naval battle between a submarine and a blimp, I've enlisted the 2 cutest reenactors in the business.
I'm airship pilot Captain Serenity. Blimps are classified as anti-submarine warfare aircraft. Our primary mission is to fly slowly alongside convoys of cargo ships for protection. We carry depth charges that cause underwater explosions to disable or destroy enemy submarines, and we also have 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns to fire at surfaced subs.
I'm Submarine Commander Indiana, and we use torpedoes to sink cargo ships, oil tankers, and basically any boat we can find. I don't have any weapons that can shoot up. Wait, this battle is super rigged.
Now, Indy, be honest.
All right, we've got 20mm machine guns, and some submarines have deck guns, but not all of them.
I don't know, blimps are kind of a big, slow-moving target.
Rigged.
Did you know that the Japanese attacked California during World War II? Yeah, after Pearl Harbor, Japan had subs off the California coast that would surface and fire machine guns at oil refineries or other buildings sort of near the shore. They didn't really do any damage, but it was enough to get people scared. And you also know Goodyear, the tire company, the Goodyear blimp that flies over football games? The Navy bought Goodyear's entire fleet of blimps and put them into service, patrolling the California coast to look for enemy submarines. On August 16, 1942, Blimp L-8 took off from San Francisco for a routine patrol mission. There were 2 crew members on board, both were very experienced. Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody, just a few months earlier, had flown spare parts out to an aircraft carrier in the Pacific whose flight deck was filled with B-25 bombers. It was on its way to Japan for the Doolittle raid. Ensign Charles Adams had over a decade of experience as an enlisted airman, even though this was his first flight as an officer. He was part of the rescue team that responded when the Hindenburg exploded over in New Jersey. These 2 experienced airmen took off 5:30 a.m. At 7:38 a.m., they reported this on the radio. "Am investigating a suspicious oil slick. Stand by." That was the last we ever heard from either man. Just poof, gone forever. So here's my best guess for what happened, but even still, my theory doesn't explain all the evidence, but it probably went something kind of like this. They spot an oil slick, which could be a sign of an enemy sub in the area. So the blimp slows down over the oil slick at a height of 300 feet above the water. They drop 2 flares out into the ocean to get a better view of the water because it's dawn, so it's still kind of dark. They see something down there, but can't tell exactly what it is. So they radio, "Am investigating suspicious oil slick, stand by." After sending the radio signal, they descend the blimp down to just 30 feet above the water to get a much better view. But in trying to identify or even recover whatever they saw, the door to the gondola malfunctions and one man is sort of dangling outside, barely hanging on, about to fall off.
"I'll save you."
And the other guy rushes to his rescue, and somehow in the commotion and the scuffle, they both fall overboard. And now, with both men in the water, the blimp is 300 pounds lighter. It floats away. There was a cargo ship nearby, the Albert Gallatin, who watched a lot of this. Wesley Lemereau was on board, and he said that the blimp was so low it was practically touching the water. Of course, the ship didn't stick around because they saw a blimp doing something suspicious. They thought there was an enemy sub in the area, so they got the heck out of there as quick as they could. Now, after the blimp floated away, wind was pushing it to the east. Multiple planes reported seeing the blimp heading east at a high altitude. They didn't think there was anything wrong. They figured it was just returning to base. However, it did go too high. Above 2,000 feet, a relief valve trips, opening to release helium, resulting in the blimp slowly returning back to ground and also causing this sort of V shape where the gondola in the middle sort of pulling it downwards, but the balloon's starting to empty out a little bit. At 11:15 a.m., the blimp drifted over Ocean Beach near Fort Funston. It was so low to the ground that two men on the beach actually managed to grab a rope and tried to hold it down, but a gust of wind carried it away after it crashed into a cliff. It floated over the Olympic Club golf course where a depth charge that was knocked loose from the cliff actually fell from the blimp and landed in the golf course, which of course sent a bunch of golfers scrambling to run away, thinking it would explode. Of course, it wouldn't explode. Depth charges are designed to be pressure activated, so it would need to be 50 feet underwater before it would have exploded. As the damaged blimp floated across the city in a V shape, a fireman told the San Francisco Chronicle, "Nah, Indy, you have to read this. I can't do it."
It looked like a big broken wiener.
That firefighter, what a legend. The airship finally crashes at 419 Bellevue Avenue, Daly City, right in front of William Morris's house. He said the doors were open and nobody was in the cabin. The people in the neighborhood thought maybe the crew were somehow inside the balloon, so they grabbed knives and were cutting open the envelope to look around inside. It was probably like a bunch of kids playing with a parachute game at gym class from elementary school. So no men were recovered at the crash site. Search and rescue went out to the oil slick and found nothing. The Navy figured the men were deserters. Maybe they had defected to Japan, but they were never found anywhere, ever. Again, my best guess is that they fell in by accident, one trying to save the other one. But there's tons of theories out there, way crazier. Aliens, top secret microwave technology. I mean, it could be anything. But if you live in San Francisco, north of San Bruno Mountain, and you think your home is haunted, Ghost Blimp. Maybe it is. So I'm awarding half a point to the submarines.
What? We don't even know that this oil slick had anything to do with a submarine. Why does Indy get half a point?
Serenity, your whole crew died from fear. Just the mere thought of a submarine in the area was enough to essentially scare the crew to death. So that has to be worth half a point to the subs.
Sounds fair to me.
Rigged.
In the aftermath, the blimp was repaired, put back in service. After the war, it was sold back to Goodyear, where Goodyear renamed it the America, and it flew over football games until 1982. If you want to see the Ghost Blimp today, it's on display. It's in the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida. Just the gondola part, like where the crew is, not the gigantic balloon. That would take up way too much space. The boat, though, the Albert Gallatin that had witnessed the Ghost Blimp, amazingly enough, it actually witnessed this next naval battle also. Right, the same boat was in both battles. It's now August 28, 1943. We are 110 miles off the coast of Savannah, Georgia. German U-boats have sunk about 1,000 ships off the US East Coast during the past year. Airship K-74 pilot Ensign Jack Healy picks up a faint magnetic reading, but it could just be an anomaly. Of course, it wasn't an anomaly. Captain Lieutenant Volker Simmermacher of German U-boat U-107 was on an attack run against the Albert Gallatin, the same cargo ship that witnessed the Ghost Blimp. After 3 torpedoes are launched, the blimp sees the wakes of 3 torpedoes heading towards the cargo ship, so their reading is certainly confirmed, enemy sub in the area. The blimp turns and follows the reverse path of the torpedoes to try to find the sub. Albert Gallatin miraculously survives. 2 of the torpedoes miss, and the 3rd bounced harmlessly off the rudder but did not detonate. The blimp drops 2 depth charges at the point of launch, which explode underwater, but several minutes had passed, so the submarine isn't still there anymore. On board the submarine, the crew celebrates. They hear the explosions from the depth charge and think that they sunk the cargo ship.
No, the timing is off. Our torpedoes should have hit before this. They're shooting at us now.
Now imagine you are on board the Albert Gallatin. You just saw a blimp drop depth charges that exploded. What's your response? No, seriously, I want you to pause the video and leave a comment. This is not a trick question. I want to know, what would you do if you're in a cargo ship in World War II and you saw a blimp drop depth charges? What would you do? Pause, leave a comment. Because the Albert Gallatin, the same boat that ran away from the Ghost Blimp, they went full stop, lowered a life raft into the water, sent crew down into the life raft, paddling out towards the depth charges to pick up dead fish so they could cook them for dinner. Bruh. Not only had they not received the message from the blimp that a submarine was in the area, they didn't even notice that a torpedo had bounced off of their boat. They just thought, hey, free fish.
Can you blame them? Fresh fish is the best.
Hey, they're getting lifeboats. We must have damaged them. All right, let's circle back, fire a few more torpedoes, and finish these guys off.
So on the blimp, they are just confused and flabbergasted, like, what the heck is going on down there? Ensign Healy gets back on the radio.
Albert Gallatin, come in. Hey, idiots. Don't you know you're under attack?
So the rowboat paddles back to Albert Gallatin. They start booking it away from the scene at full speed, and what must have looked something like out of an episode of Benny Hill. The blimp thinks that they may have a location on the sub, so they drop 2 more depth charges, which don't damage the sub, but it does scare them away. U-107 keeps its distance for a few hours, hoping the blimp will leave and they can get another attack run on the Albert Gallatin, but they don't get a chance, and this is the end of the battle. So Albert Gallatin survived another day, but another sub did later finish them off. Albert Gallatin was sunk by a Japanese sub in 1944. Not a great outcome for the crew, but not a total surprise based on their behavior on this day off of Georgia. And the battle between K-74 and U-107 ends in a draw. Score is still Submarines 0.5, Blimps 0.
Well, of course it was a draw. I was shooting at the boat. I wasn't even trying to hit the blimp.
It's July 18, 1943. We're between the Florida Keys and Cuba, about 30 miles from the Florida coast. We're 2 years into the war. Rules of engagement said that blimps were supposed to identify enemy subs and call in air support or destroyers. They were only supposed to engage if attacks on cargo ships were imminent. But Commodore Mills was getting anxious. The war was going to be over soon, and they hadn't killed a single enemy sub. The brass was putting pressure on blimp pilots to get in the fight. K-74, piloted by Lieutenant Nelson Grills, found a chance. He spotted a surfaced enemy submarine. He reported enemy position back to base, but in their excitement, they reported the position with a typo. The real position was 30 miles west of the position they reported. So no help was gonna arrive anytime soon, but that didn't end up mattering because Lieutenant Grills didn't intend on waiting. Now down on the water on board U-134, Over-Lieutenant Hans Gunther Brosen was surfaced for routine maintenance. Cycling out carbon dioxide for air, regular stuff. Some of his 44 crew members were out on deck just enjoying a bit of fresh air. Of course, maybe all these breaks is why this was overall a pretty unsuccessful sub, having only sunk 2 ships in the past 2 years. So the blimp was at an altitude of 500 feet above the water, 8 miles behind the submarine, traveling at 47 knots. It's nighttime, but there's a full moon and clear skies, making visibility excellent. It's 11:40 p.m. They'd reached the sub in about 10 minutes. Their altitude is now 250 feet. They're 250 yards, 30 degrees off the sub's stern quarter. Bad news from the blimp is, of course, U-134 had spotted the enormous balloon up in the sky long before the blimp had spotted the dark sub that blends in with the waves, so the sub was waiting on them.
Left full rudder.
The sub turned hard to port and began 20mm machine gun fire from the conning tower. The blimp's bag and gondola were taking fire. One of their engines was hit and exploded in flames. Now, most German U-boats did not have a deck gun, but this one did.
Kaboom, baby.
The submarine had an 88mm cannon on its aft end that fired one, then a second, then a third shot at the blimp as it passed overhead, piercing the bag. Air and helium rapidly escaped and the blimp was going down. But the blimp did successfully pass over the sub for its bombing run. Machinist mate Isidor Stessel was manning the bombardier station assigned to drop 2 depth charges on either side of the sub, and the bombs failed to release. The blimp does rain down 50mm machine gun fire down at the submarine, but no depth charges. In the end, it shouldn't be too hard to guess whether a steel tube or a rubber tube will win a gunfight. Filled with holes, the balloon tips nose up vertical and slowly crashes down into the ocean. The blimp crashes at 11:55 p.m. On board the blimp, quick, Serenity, throw out the life raft. I'll grab all the cat treats.
Done. What's next?
All right, I got the treats. Where's the raft?
It blew away?
You didn't hold onto the rope when you threw it in the water?
You didn't say hold on to the rope, you just said throw it in the water. Hey, handsome and beautiful viewers, please hit the thumbs up button if you think I should still get treats.
So the life raft blew away. Of course, Serenity still gets her treats. There were 10 crew members on board the airship. They entered the water wearing their Mae West life vests. They clung to each other or miscellaneous pieces of wreckage, waiting for rescue. When the blimp didn't immediately sink, the pilot, Lieutenant Grills, went back to the blimp and threw overboard some classified materials and electronic devices to ensure they wouldn't be recovered by the Germans. When he left the blimp the second time, in the waves, he wasn't able to find the rest of his crew. So after midnight, we've got 9 men adrift and Lieutenant Grills alone in the water. And there's still a U-boat nearby. Luckily for the airmen, it's a quiet night. And 8 hours later, at 7:50 a.m., a scout plane flies overhead.
Quick, everyone, do your best impression of an injured seal to make sure the plane sees us. Splash, splash, splash.
The 9 crew members were spotted by the plane and radioed a destroyer who was 15 miles away who could immediately come and make the rescue. Dun-na, 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 dun-na. Unfortunately for the crew, planes aren't the only creatures interested in injured seals. The bombardier, Isidor Stessel, was eaten by a shark during the hour between being spotted by the plane and rescued by the destroyer. When the blimp sunk at 8:15 a.m., the depth charges exploded underwater at a depth of 50 feet, indicating they were armed properly. But with the airship sunk and the bombardier, the only person who knew what happened, the only person who died, we'll never know why the bombs failed to release. But as a precaution, the Navy redesigned the bomb release mechanism to make it simpler, just in case it had been a mechanical failure. Lieutenant Grills, having been unable to locate his crew in the waves, had started swimming towards Florida. He had gotten 6 miles towards shore before he was found later that afternoon. He was in the water for 18 hours before being rescued. Now the U-boat, U-134, was sunk a month later by a British patrol plane. But before this, they had rendezvoused with another submarine and passed on intelligence and photographs to that other German sub. That information wasn't recovered until decades later, but what it showed was that U-134 had sustained damage to their quick dive tanks from the machine gun fire from K-74. And so even though blimps went through the entire World War II thinking that they had never sunk a single submarine, It turns out that about 20 years later, we found out that they at least got an assist on one of them. And for that, I can award Captain Serenity half a point for not sinking, but sufficiently damaging the U-boat that made it an easier target. And for the submarines, 1 full point for shooting down K-74. Final score, submarines 1.5, blimps 0.5. So who would win the battle between a submarine and a blimp goes to the submarines. So this book really is awesome. Blimps and U-boats by J. Gordon Berth. I'll put a link down in the description. The author was a naval intelligence officer during World War II. So this is a great source if you want to find more about blimps, one of those ships that we don't really use anymore. So they're kind of interesting and mysterious.
Thanks for watching.